Hello, Raquel. It's 9 p.m. Eastern, and I'm so delighted that you chimed in right at 9 p.m. because last night I was like, how do you engage your audience when you start broadcasting and like nobody's joined yet? So glad that you are here. This is 7 days to a higher motivation and a 4.0 GPA. And tonight I'm actually on the third night of my training. But how are y'all doing tonight? Before I get going, let me just ask you, did you have a good day? Send me up some hearts. Let me know you're there. Hi. And I must say, congratulations to Raquel, who won a free copy of my new book, The Spirit-Led Student, which is really my journey of going through 3 years of graduate school and how I moved out of a performance paradigm to a more spiritual paradigm for not only great achievement, but fulfillment. So the first night I talked about the 7 keys to peak performance. The second night, I really spoke about, yes, you're welcome, spoke about one of the first 3 of some amazingly important processes. Hey, Samantha, so glad you're here. Samantha won a free private coaching session with me because she was the first one to post her homework on my Facebook page. But anyways, the 3 most important processes that you must do for super achievement. I don't care if you're already a great student. I don't care whether you have a high IQ, a low IQ. I don't care where you are at in this process. I have coached some of the brightest students in the nation, where I went to school at Duke University. I have coached some really struggling students who wanted to excel but didn't know how. And you must do these 3 processes that I am talking about this week to really excel. And the very first one I talked about last night was about you must have a positive mind. Peak performance cannot happen in negativity. So I wanted to introduce that concept to you. And tonight, I would say this is one of the greatest truths, greatest technologies, greatest processes that I've ever learned in my life. And I believe the whole world needs to be on this scope because if you're human, you need this insight and understanding that I call energy management. I had chronic fatigue for 17 years. That's a long time. And I drove myself to the brink because for so long, as an athlete, I found my identity and my worth in my performance. And so I would always drive myself to the brink, and then I would achieve, and then I would crash. And so for many, many years, I struggled with chronic fatigue. And I made a determination in my mind that I was not going through life not being healed. And as I began to search for a real answer to my situation, I came across some amazing work by a world-class trainer named Dr. James Lower. And Dr. James Lower has trained hundreds of world-class athletes, and he began to study the difference between what caused someone to finish number 1 and what caused someone to finish number 2. And he would study Jimmy Connors, and of course these are great tennis superstars back in the day, and realized that the only difference between how number 1 finished and how number 2 finished was how they used the few seconds between their shots. And he called that recovery time. And if someone was like, come on, you can do it, this is great, pumped himself up, he gave himself an added advantage versus someone who between shots, would put himself down and criticize himself and, produce negative energy. And so Dr. Lower began to transfer this knowledge over to people that are non-athletes. The first book that I read was called Toughness Training for Life. And the second one, which I'm going to speak out of tonight, but I highly recommend, is called The Power of Full Engagement by Dr. James Lower, Loehr. If you are a student, if you are homeschooling, I believe that if students, workers, families would tap into this, you would be so much more productive. And here's the bottom line. His whole premise is that managing energy, not time, is the key to sustained high performance. Managing energy, your energy, not time, is the key to sustained high performance. And I just want to, just briefly read you, because I can't say it any better than him, some of his truths in here, because we all have to perform in the storm. We all have pressure. We all have something that's going to come up. And the better we can perform in the storm, and champions are those that can perform under pressure with ease, with confidence, the better your performance is going to be. And in order to do that, we have to build a capacity to perform in the storm. So the objective is to build the necessary capacity to sustain high performance in the face of increasing demand. I come across so many students, and particularly adult learners who work full-time. They have a family to manage and engage in, and then they go into a graduate program, and they think just because they're going to add this graduate program that they're going to be able to do well, instead of having to really reorganize the way they go about using their energy. So energy is the fundamental currency of high performance. Think about that. If you don't have energy, hey Tanika, so glad to see you. Your the color of your thing matches my vest. Anyways, if you don't have energy, you cannot perform. And so we have to understand the dynamics of energy, how it works, and here's the clincher. You can capture energy at will. You can recapture energy at will. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but this is what he says. Capacity is a function of one's ability to expand and recover energy. Every thought, every feeling, and action has an energy consequence to it. You cannot have a thought and it not have an energy consequence to it. And energy is the most important individual and organizational resource. So we want to manage our energy, we want to recapture our energy, and we want energy to be the fundamental currency of how we go throughout our day. And why is this important? Because peak performance happens when you are fully engaged. And he defines being fully engaged as being physically energized, emotionally connected, mentally focused, and spiritually aligned. I'm going to say that again. Being fully engaged is being physically energized, mentally focused, emotionally connected, and spiritually aligned. When all of your energy sources are fully engaged, you will have a peak performance. So we have to learn to manage energy in all dimensions. And so what I really want to say to you is there are 4 energy sources. We are, and they are mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. Most of us know that we are physical beings and we have physical energy, but we also have mental energy, and that mental energy can be low, it can be high, it can be positive, it can be negative. We have emotional energy. That energy can be positive, it could be negative, it could be low level positive, it could be high level negative. Probably one of the most high-level negative emotional energies is anger. And one of the highest, I think it is the highest positive emotional energy is joy. And so we can decide what our emotional state is. And then, of course, there's spiritual energy. So here's the key. The way you recapture energy at will, the way you recapture energy at will is to move from one energy source to another. Now, let me give you an example. Say, for instance, the stress that you have throughout your day. Let's just say you are in landscaping. So the stress that you have during your day is largely physical stress. Work is anything that takes energy from you. Stress is anything that takes energy from you. And recovery is anything that brings you energy. So let's just say you go home, you work 8 hours, you're tired, you've been stressed. The way you can recapture that energy is to move from the physical, let's just say, to the mental. Or maybe you take a half hour and you get still and you just meditate. When I used to travel from North Carolina to Virginia and I'd stay in the car for many hours, I would get out of the car, my back would be hurting, and I would be under a lot of physical stress. So instead of keeping that stress in me, I would time my trip to arrive to the 5 o'clock yoga class where I would work out that stress out of my lower back and then be on my way. So whenever, again, you move from one energy source to another is how you recapture energy at will. Now, for students or educators, most of your stress is going to be mental stress. You're going to be wigged out. You're going to be tired of study. You're going to be mentally fatigued. So one of the greatest ways to recapture energy if you are a student is through exercise. And Lower says that there are two kinds of circadian waves that go through our body. One oscillates every 24 hours, and that is in accordance with our sleep cycle. And the other oscillates about every 90 minutes. So for every 90 to 120 minutes that you are doing work, you need 15 minutes of recovery. So I would never really study for more than 2.5 hours straight. And after that concentrated study time, I would go exercise, which means I would put myself in a completely different emotional energy. And one of the things that I began to do as an academic coach and a performance coach, I created something called a study cycle. And a study cycle is a cycle that you create that actually includes all 4 energy sources. For instance, I was coaching a junior high boy who was labeled ADD, ADHD, he couldn't focus. And I said, I'm going to create a study cycle for this kid where we're going to move from stress to recovery. And we created like an hour study cycle for him. He could not concentrate for more than 15 minutes. So that was his study time, 15 to 20 minutes. So he came home from school, and the first thing he did, he got on his bicycle and rode that bicycle vigorously for 10 minutes. Then he sat down and he studied for 15 minutes and he pushed it to 20. He liked to play a musical instrument, so after that, he played the musical instrument. And this was a faith-based student, and I had created a program called God's Way to an A, so he did that for 15 minutes. So he literally went from physical to mental to emotional to spiritual within about an hour and 15 minutes time. And he went from making went from F's to B's in a week.